Peace, family. Today, I want to talk to you about how the enemy is losing it because you stopped losing. Now, again, as I always say, when I speak about the enemy, I'm not talking about any particular person. You might have a specific image of someone who pops in your head when I say the enemy, and whoever that person is, they might feel like your enemy. But please understand, when I mean enemy, I mean an energy that can hop from person to person. It's an energy that occupies and attaches itself to dark, empty spaces. And unfortunately, those dark, empty spaces sometimes exist inside of people. So, like I said in the last video, and just so you know, these videos in this series, they are numbered, and I think it helps to watch them in order. So if you just found my channel, you might want to go back and at least watch the last few videos leading up to this one so that you can better understand like what I mean when I say certain things. But yeah, like I said in the last video, the enemy usually attains some sort of success or shine early in life. Typically, they're able to follow a traditional path that is laid out and pretty much guaranteed with social markers of achievement. And if they aren't able to do it on their own, they're able to attach themselves to people who can so that they can benefit from those associations. But on the other hand, God's people, who I like to call allies, they do not tend to follow any sort of traditional path, nor are we capable of attaching ourselves to other people in order to benefit from those associations. Because even if we wanted to, we're usually too different or too weird or outcast in some way. Like God's people are usually underdogs. Folks do not bet on us. People look at our lives and they feel like we'll never make it, or the odds are stacked too high against us, or they think we don't know how to play the game of life, so we can't win it. Sometimes they'll even look at our positive attributes and consider them negatives, like, oh, this person is too sweet, or they're too naive, or they're too honest, or they have too many morals or too many principles. And we're usually taught that any sort of conventional success requires that we act opposite to our true nature. Whereas the enemy has no problem switching up and acting however they need to act to achieve the goal that they're trying to achieve. So what will happen is the enemy will begin to subconsciously build their entire identity around this dynamic. So for example, if like say if they always have money, but they're friends with an ally, with one of God's people, and this person who is on this sort of like spiritual path, their money be funny, it's because they're struggling to kind of operate in the world. But what'll happen is that the enemy will come to think of themselves as the rich one and then the ally as the poor one. Or say if the enemy is always in a relationship, or say they're conventionally attractive and so they're often getting flirted with or approached, and their friend, the ally or the God's person, maybe they're not in, successful, stable relationships, or maybe they don't usually get hollered at or approached because they're not conventionally attractive. Well, what'll happen is, the enemy will start thinking of themselves as like the cute one, or the lovable one. Whereas the other one, the ally, is like the ugly one, the lonely one. Now, this is human nature, okay? It is natural to label or identify people based on their situations. But the problem is that God's people tend to understand that people change, that circumstances change, that life changes. So they might struggle, but the struggle doesn't define them. It's something that God is like using to strengthen them and they're going to move through it, and they're going to come out stronger on the other side. And God's people know that they'll be blessed as a result of their struggles. I mean, that's biblical. I'm not going to get into how that's biblical, but it is that your struggles do bless you. So yeah, so it's like God's people, we just know that we're just only going to get smarter, faster, stronger, finer, wiser, richer, better, more peaceful, more stable. Even if, because it just doesn't, it stops being about that. It stops being about the external. It starts being about internal peace, and that focus creates external. peace and happiness and all those things, And the Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you. And the Bible also says that the kingdom is within you. So it's, it kind of makes sense that if you find peace within, you're going to find peace without. Anyway. The enemy they don't know about that. They don't do all that, okay? Because they're filled with emptiness and darkness and just dissatisfaction. So it's like they don't have a core center or identity. They just, at their core, it's just like this hunger and this wanting and this desire. Ultimately, there's no there, right? Just like covetousness. So since they don't have like a stable, strong, solid sense of self, it's like they only know themselves in relation to other people. So in other words, if she's the poor one, then I'm the rich one. If she's the ugly one, then I'm the cute one. If she's the one who can never go anywhere, then I'm the free one. If she's the fat one, then I'm the thin one, right? It's like, do you understand what I mean? The enemy only knows who they are based on who you are. So it's like if you're a work of art, they're the negative space. Your form gives them form. They exist in relation to you. So without your identity, or if your identity shifts, their identity shifts, right? If you change, they don't know who they are. So this is why the enemy does not want you to change, because if you grow and you change, if they only exist in relation to you, then they have to change, and that's not easy for them. Dare I say, it's impossible. You can change because you have a stable core idea of who you are, okay? And they don't have that. So for you to change, it just feels like who you are is changing. For them to change, it's like who I was is disappearing because I don't know who I am, So, like I said in the last video, though, God's people are always going to glow up. That's the thing. Like, that's literally the whole point of being in the army of the Lord, which is to live a life that becomes like this miraculous unfolding. It becomes a testimony to the goodness of God and the grace of God and the faithfulness of God. And these are the kinds of things that can really only be observed over time. So it's like God kind of plans it out that way. He always wants to show up and show out through his people. But you can only show up and show out if you have first been downplayed and underestimated, and people have looked down on you and people have pitied you. And so, God will set it up so that people will use you as a cautionary tale to feel better about themselves, and you become the at least in their lives, right? They might say, things look bad for me, but at least they aren't as bad as this other person, as Bria. I might be a little broke, but at least I'm not as broke as Bria. Or, I might have made some mistakes, but at least I didn't make as many mistakes as Bria. Like, motherfuckers will really like smile themselves to sleep at night thinking about how their misfortunes aren't as bad as yours. They'll be like, at least it ain't that bad, So it's like, because you're the cursed one, they're the lucky one. You know what I'm saying? So what happens is that the enemy literally becomes energetically invested in you being down bad, because they feel like at least they're not as down as bad as you. So if you're lacking, they at least know they have more than you. Your life becomes the baseline, that they're always just like a few steps above, or maybe a lot of steps above, whatever, but at least they know that they're not at that baseline. But this right here is why this what I'm saying is God is setting it up, because what does the Bible say? It says the first shall be last and the last shall be first. The first shall be last and the last shall be first, right? So because God is glorified by promoting those from the bottom, those in that pile of the at least, right? That's the part that the enemy never sees coming. The enemy thinks that it's so lucky, that they're so lucky that they didn't have to struggle, right? But then later in life, they can't deal with hardships because they've never had to practice doing hard things, and they crumble. And meanwhile, God's people are weathered, okay? We're strong, we're resilient. And so when we do glow up, when that glow up happens, when we're no longer the broken one, the poor one, the lost one, the fat one, the sick one, the sad one, the ugly one, and now we're the prosperous one, the beautiful one, the healthy one, the inspirational one, the happy one. In relation to those changes, the enemy no longer has any fucking idea who they are. Like, they feel like they're in Bizarro world, right? They feel lost. They're like, what the fuck? Like, I thought I was the pretty one. If this bitch is pretty, then what does that make me? If she's prosperous, what does that make me? If she's happy, what does that make me? Right? Now we, God's people, we know that it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be the one of any of these things. We can all be beautiful. We can all be happy. We can all be prosperous. And we know that because we didn't used to be that way. Like, we have a core self-identity. And so we have, like, through turning within to our heaven within, and focusing on our inner light, we know that we have used that light to change from within. And then, when we come up, and this sounds weird to say, but when we come back outside ourselves or whatever, we see that, like, we've actually changed our lives. Yeah, so that's that, but that's something that the enemy can't really do. They don't really have like a core self-identity based on any sort of inner light. They have, like I said, this hungry hole of darkness. If there's no there can't be any change there. There can only be change in terms of negative space. In other words, of what they surround, what they attach to, and then they take the shape, like the opposite shape of that thing. Okay, so it's like I said, in terms of negative space, I'm not this, so I must be that. So it's like when they can't compare themselves to you anymore, or not in a way where they come out favorable, it sends them into a tailspin. They feel threatened by your changes because it changes their perspective of themselves. They were the winner because you were the loser. And now that you're winning, they're like, okay, so does that make me a loser? It's very confusing. So you were supposed to stay in your place so they could stay in their place. Now that you've grown and moved and changed, you fucked it all up. It's like, how dare you? How dare you stop struggling? How dare you know who you are? How dare you be proud of yourself? How dare you love yourself? How dare you celebrate yourself? How dare you walk in your purpose? How dare you live in your light? They're like, bitch, you were supposed to be lost and I was supposed to be found, not the other way around. So, yeah, I mean, this season, the enemy is salty as hell. The enemy got really comfortable and complacent with the way things were, but things just are not like that anymore. It's like our feet are on their necks. Sorry. Our feet are on their necks. And it's not even our foot, it's God's foot, right? This isn't even something that we tried to do. We was just minding our business. But it's wild because the Bible does say that the Lord will make your enemy into a footstool. And it's just simply because they thought it's because they had made you into a footstool. You know what I mean? And now the first is last and the last is first and the least is greatest and the greatest is the least, and it's all flipped. And it is what it is. There's nothing we can do except stay humble, right? Because we didn't do this ourselves. God did it. But all we can do is like be exalted and enjoy the view from up here. Like that's it. Be peaceful. But yeah, they mad. They gonna be mad for a while. And I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening. I hope this helped you, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.